Hi, I'm Dr Kaylene Henderson, and I'm a medically trained child and adolescent psychiatrist, a trusted training provider for the early years education sector, and one of Australia's leading parenting experts. I'm also a very grateful mother of 3 awesome children. Thank you so much for joining me as we celebrate Children's Week together. Before I begin, I wanted to quickly explain that I'll be using the term parents for simplicity, but know that this equally applies to non-biological parents, grandparents, guardians, kinship, and foster carers too. Okay, let's get started. In this short video, I'll be sharing with you what I've been lucky enough to have learned in my years of specialist training. The key to bringing out the best in your children. The one factor that trumps all others in influencing children's well-being and long-term developmental outcomes. Are you ready for it? It's having a quality relationship with you. You see, from the moment babies are born, their primary need is to form a relationship with at least one adult. After all, they need us to help them in so many ways, to feed them, clothe them, provide them with shelter, regulate their body temperature. So they're cleverly hardwired to cue us in ways that make us want to care for them in order to ensure their survival. These cues, even that addictive newborn smell, aim to help us fall in love with them and to prioritize their care over all else, like sleep and a social life. It's not all about survival though, because decades of research also tell us that the quality of this relationship that children manage to form with the important adults in their lives dictates all sorts of outcomes, including how their brain develops, their behavior, their social and emotional development, self-esteem, resilience, and school readiness. Even their academic success at a grade 12 level is influenced by the quality of their early relationships. Incredible, really. Yet your impact doesn't even stop there. Your relationships with your children forms the template for their future relationships with their friends, their teachers, their future partners, even with their own children. You can see that your early interactions actually have a lasting effect on your children's lives. It's no wonder then that in the eyes of your children, you are one of the most important people in the universe. You're kind of a big deal. The thing is though, we'll all have different expectations of what it means to have a quality relationship with our children, because we, as a diverse group of parents and professionals, have all come from different backgrounds ourselves. We've all been raised differently. And in part, our expectations of how we should interact and relate with our kids is influenced by our own upbringing. Let me explain a helpful concept relating to memory. You see, when we think about memory, we tend to think about a type of explicit memory called autobiographical memory. These are the memories of events that have happened to us. They're stories, with you in them. You would have these memories of the day your child was born, of what you had for breakfast, of your favorite travel memory, and so on. Importantly, these memories are encoded in language, so you won't be able to recall autobiographical memories from when you were a baby because you hadn't yet developed the language skills to store these memories. Another type of memory, which is really important though when we're talking about parenting, is a type of implicit memory known as procedural memory. These aren't memories of what's happened to us, but rather they're memories of how to do things, and in particular, how to do things that we need to be able to do on autopilot. So, for example, when you're riding a bike or driving a car, you're relying on these types of implicit memories. These memories aren't encoded in language, so when you're riding a bike, for example, it doesn't feel like you're remembering. There's no story. In fact, you're often not thinking about the task itself at all. You're literally able to operate on autopilot. It just feels like you're riding your bike, doing it how it ought to be done. In the same way, the way in which we were parented is stored as procedural memory. This means that when we grow up to become parents, we can just get on and parent. Have you heard that saying, I open my mouth and my mother comes out? That's your procedural memory, your autopilot. It feels to all of us like we're parenting the way it ought to be done, just like when we're riding a bike. For me, knowing about procedural memory really takes the judgment out of parenting. I have no doubt that, just like me, you've been doing your best for your kids. We all want the best for our children. But when we understand that it's often a combination of autopilot and perhaps a little trial and error that's brought us to this point, we can start to become more open to learning different strategies, ones that decades of research have reassuringly shown to have positive effects on our children's learning, development, and well-being. As I go through the following tips, I want you to reflect on which of these you do already and which of these you might be able to start to do or to tweak a little if they haven't been part of your parenting autopilot thus far, in order to make your relationship with your little ones as awesome as possible. Firstly, connect with your kids. This really is so important. The relationship your children have with you is honestly one of the most important relationships they will have in their lives. The memories you make together will define their childhood. And let's face it, we spend an awful lot of time with our kids too, so we also benefit if we can connect and have some fun together. Be playful, laugh, sing silly songs. Discover how each of your children likes to have fun and make sure you have lots of it. Ask your children questions and really listen to their answers. Ask them what their favourite songs or stories are and why. Ask them if there are any parts of the day that they find tricky. Be curious. Seek their opinions and suggestions. As you do, you won't simply develop a closer relationship with your child, but you're also modelling for them how to be in relationship with others. You can also connect with your children through touch. Small moments of incidental touch really help our kids to feel more connected with us. When I'm reaching past one of my children at the table to grab the Weet-Bix, I often pop a hand on their back. As I walk past the three of them while they're playing, I might kiss each of them on top of the head. These small moments add up and can make a big difference for our children. See the good in your kids. I'm sure there's a whole lot of good there to see. And be sure to share with your children what it is that you like about them. Make comments like, "I love how kind you are," or "You make me laugh, my funny one." Even when your children have done the wrong thing, be clear that you still think your child is a good person, even if they made a bad choice. The way we see our children influences how they see themselves. If we see our children as naughty, they often live up to those expectations. If we see them as responsible, they're more likely to become so. I know some parents are reluctant to have this sort of close relationship with their kids because they're worried that their children won't respect them, or perhaps won't listen to them, or will behave more poorly. But think about how you want to behave when you're with the people in your life who you feel closest to. Just like us, children are more likely to put their best selves forward for adults with whom they have a close, positive relationship. Which brings me to my next tip: delight. Delight is communicated non-verbally. It's the way your eyes and face light up and the way your body turns towards someone when you're with them. When I think about delight, I often think of a couple of my close girlfriends from uni. We only get to catch up a couple of times a year, but when we do, as soon as we spot one another, our faces light up. We're just delighted to be together. Now, it's no surprise that given how important you are to your children, when they see that just by existing, they can make you light up, they feel pretty good about themselves. If this continues over time, our children will develop an internalized sense that they must be an inherently good and worthwhile person. It's no surprise then that delight is thought to be the foundation for self-esteem development in our children. Research also tells us that delight promotes brain growth in babies, which is pretty magical really. That our responses, our eye contact, and our facial expressions can influence brain development in another human being. Interestingly, research also suggests that babies who have been shown more delight in their first year of life grow into more cooperative 2-year-olds. So for those of you with a baby, if that's not a good incentive, I don't know what is. Let your eyes, your smile, and your attentiveness communicate how wonderful your children are. In return, they will not only feel wonderful, but it's also more likely that they will want to behave wonderfully for you too. Next, help your children just enough. Our children are learning new skills all the time. The best way to support them to become more independent with a task is by helping them just enough so that they can do it by themselves. By helping children not too much or too little, but just enough, we provide them with opportunities to master challenging tasks, to learn new skills, and to really develop a sense that they are a competent, capable person. Even if your autopilot is guiding you to do differently, know that our children can't develop that important sense of competence if we always jump in to do things for them. This applies to all sorts of physical tasks, like getting dressed, navigating playground equipment, or for older children, tackling tricky homework tasks. And it equally applies to social challenges too. After all, it's important that our children learn to manage all sorts of tricky situations when we're not around. So it's worth checking in with yourself. Do I help my children just enough? Because when we find that sweet spot, we can really help to build up our children's resilience. Another important way we can build resilience in our kids is by allowing them to experience both the ups and downs of life. Our kids need repeated practice at dealing with manageable setbacks and disappointments in order to become more resilient. How can we expect our kids to handle the big stuff life will throw at them when they're adults if they haven't had practice at handling the little stuff? We also need to allow our children to take risks. Sometimes they'll fall, sometimes they'll fail, and that's okay, because our kids need practice judging and taking risks, working out which ones to take and which ones to leave well alone. What we don't want is to protect our children from these opportunities, only to one day have teenagers who are having a crack at risk-taking for the first time when deciding whether or not to get into a drunk friend's car. I know this is one of the more challenging parts of parenting for many of us, particularly if risk-taking made your own parents anxious. It won't be part of your parenting autopilot, but it's never too late to make changes to our parenting that ultimately benefit our children. Providing comfort is next on the list, because, as you know, parenting isn't all about the good times. No lasting relationship is. Often our children will come to us feeling upset, and they have to come to us with their upsets because it actually takes years for children to develop the ability to calm themselves down from big feeling states. In the meantime, they'll often become overwhelmed, and you'll need to be their comforting go-to person, even if your autopilot tries to tell you something different. The best place to start when your child is distressed is simply to respond with connection and empathy. Stop what you're doing, connect with your child, and show them in your mirrored facial expression and through your words that you get it. You might say things like, "It seems like you're feeling pretty sad about this," or, "Gee, you're feeling really frustrated. I get frustrated sometimes too." Or, "I know, you're feeling disappointed you can't go to that party. I get it." When we respond to our children with connection and empathy, we do three important things. Firstly, we help their activated brain pathways calm down in the most efficient manner. I'm sure you found this response helpful when friends or other loved ones have responded to you in this way. We all feel better more quickly when they're with someone who just seems to get it. Secondly, we strengthen our relationships with our children. We position ourselves as their go-to person when life gets hard or overwhelming. Which brings us to the third benefit. When we allow our children to come to us when they're upset, rather than sending them away, we teach them that they can turn to others for help when they're feeling overwhelmed in life. And that's a really important lesson for our children to learn, especially as they head into their teenage years and beyond. Another important part of your role is to be in charge. As parents, we need to be in charge. We need to be able to set rules and limits that keep our kids safe and guide them through life. But it's important to realize that we don't have to be distant, harsh, overly strict, or frightening to do that effectively. Quite the opposite. It's really about finding that right balance as parents so that we can be both the person who is in charge and also the person our children have fun with, feel loved by, and want to turn to when life gets tricky. I've heard this middle ground referred to as no-nonsense tenderness, a phrase that I love. Let's recap those 6 important elements again as we near the end of our whirlwind relationship tour. Connect with your children, delight in them, help them just enough, build their resilience, be their comforting go-to person, and be in charge, providing your children with that all-important no-nonsense tenderness that balances their need for both independence and closeness. Some of these things you'll be doing already. They will already be a part of your parenting autopilot. But perhaps I've touched on a few things that you hadn't thought to do before. that may have been different from your own experience of having been parented. No matter what age your child is, it's never too late. It is never too late to have the kind of relationship with your child that you both want and that your child needs. Honestly, we're all learning on the job, myself included. Just ask my kids. It may feel strange for a while as you try these new approaches, just like it would if I was asking you to ride your bike differently from how you might have learned. But it's worth it. And over time, you'll develop a new, improved autopilot while bringing out the best in your children along the way. Of course, I'm aware that it's not just parents who've joined me for this message today. Educators, you are incredibly important in our children's lives, and your relationships with them, based on the same principles I've described, help to guide their lifelong learning, well-being, and healthy development. And to the decision makers in our society, thank you for joining me to learn more about the critical importance of children's early relationships. The theme of Children's Week this year reminds us that all children have the right to a standard of living that supports their well-being and healthy development, which to me says that we need to value and invest in the people who can offer these kinds of quality relationships with children, those best placed to lay the critical foundations that support our children's well-being and healthy development. And that's parents and educators. I know that our society often presents competing priorities, but honestly, what could be a better investment than our future generations? Thank you, all of you, for joining me for this whirlwind tour on how to bring out the best in our youngest Australians. I hope that I've been able to help you just enough in your important role. You've got this.